Hello and welcome to the Emerging Consciousness Global Online Festival, a kaleidoscope of voices and perspectives on awakening. Here we are gathering with leading transformative coaches, cultural creatives, visionary artists, and an eclectic mix of wisdom keepers blended with colorful new voices in order to create a catalyzing space where curious people come for fearless and experiential learning. So thank you for being a part of this transpersonal movement to liberate minds and supercharge consciousness so that we can co-create a more peaceful and evolved world. My name is Tami Mensh. I'm a transformative life and spiritual business coach. I am founder of the Kaleidoscope Lounge and Coaching and founder and creator of this event. And I am here to serve people on a journey to fullness of expression, joy, authenticity, and deep wisdom. And as part of this emerging consciousness event, I felt it was really important to bring in the aspect of adult development theory and where are we now in terms of our adult development. So much has changed in this world and so much is emerging. And so I've invited adult development theory expert Jennifer Garvey Berger to join us here today to share some of her views and some of her learnings and key points on adult development theory and see where she thinks that we are and where we're headed and what's next. So hi, Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you for having me. What a great mission.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just think this is such an important conversation. And I know that I've watched you on many Coaches Rising programs and at the ICF conference as a keynote. And it always just puts such a good context onto whatever the topic is, in terms of leadership and development. And I was just really excited to have you come bring that to this conversation. So I know it's a big topic and you've been working with it for a long time. So where do you think the best place to start is in this discussion?
Oh, what a big question, Tami. I mean, I guess if we're talking about adult development, it's useful to kind of say what we mean. Like, what is it that grows? I always used to be confused with this idea that many people talked about transformation without thinking about what's the form that's mutating, right? Like that's changing. What is the form? And I think about what's the form of our mind, what's the form of our understanding of the world, and how does that thing change over time to become more able to handle complexity, ambiguity, to become differently able to connect in relationships. And so it's probably a good time for the people who are watching, listening, us, to kind of think about what they mean when they think about adult growth or adult development, or what the form is that they're in right now and what the form is that they could be in next. Because I think even that question opens us up, like regardless of what particular theory gives you an answer, that question, I think, leads us to a really interesting inquiry.
So the question that we're throwing out is, where do we think that we are in that form?
Yeah, like what does that even mean? Like what's the form of you that's growing? Generally, people don't have on the tip of their tongue a kind of life story of their growth and development. They have like, where did I move? What did I do? How many kids did I have, right? Like we have plot elements. But it's harder for us to think about the kind of, if we were the main character of the novel, people would also be studying the development of the character over time. And it's easy for us to kind of grab onto plot elements in our story, but it's harder for us to grab onto the development of our character in our story.
So is that possible? How do we put that into a development shape?
So I think it's where theories come in, because you could have everybody who's watching kind of pause the recording right now and sketch some sense of what their character development has been, or what their trajectory is, where they've come from and where they've gotten to now. Because it's only when we do that that we can begin to look forward at who we might become next, which is this emerging consciousness idea, what is possible. But if you've done that, if you've paused and thought about it yourself, then we can say, I think adult development theories, whichever sections of them, whichever theorists you kind of pay attention to, spiritual development theories or cognitive development theories or constructive developmental theories, ego development, all these different lines, each of them show us something really interesting about who we are as humans. And the line I follow most closely is the Robert Keegan line. He was my dissertation advisor when I was a doctoral student. And this is this question about what are we able to look at and make decisions on, as opposed to what are we being? What are we like looking through? And how do we move things from what we're looking through to what we can look at? This whole question that he calls the move from subject, that which we are looking through, to object, that which we're looking at, we can see and make decisions about. And he describes a series of kind of changes, eras of our understanding over time. And earlier in our lives, we are kind of inside inside the room of our own understanding, our own mind, our own perspective. I call that the self-sovereign space, where we can see that other people have minds and perspectives, but we can't really touch it. We can't really touch them. We can't really take them in. And for most people, that happens in adolescence and very early adulthood. But for some people, it happens over the course of their lives. Like you can stay in that space forever, where you are kind of your own island and you can't take in the perspectives of others. And then, like most things on this developmental path, like most things humans do, when we move out of that into the next era, we kind of over index, right? We swing from like just being alone, unable to take perspectives, into a place where we take in other people's perspectives so much they become us. And we start to inhale the world around us, inhale those other perspectives. And we take our cues from the outside world. What should I be doing? How am I doing now? What do you think? What does the world tell me? What is my particular society or profession or circle of friends or church? What do those things tell me about who I'm being and how I should be? And I kind of take that in from others. We call that the socialized mind. And for most of human history, that was probably everything we needed, right? When we lived in villages dotted around the world, to be able to subordinate what was most important to us to the greater good of our community, and to be able to look to some guide, like some chief or wise person, to tell us what was a good life, what was a right life, who should I marry, what should I do? All those things coming at us from the outside, I could just breathe it in and relax into it. And that was probably the way most societies got built, developed, and emerged. And then a feature began to grow out of that, which is when we're not just in little villages dotted around the world, but there's some grit about what should we do, what's success, what's who should I love, how should I love, what should my profession be, where should I live? All of a sudden, these choices are like not so obvious, not so able to be breathed in from the outside. And so some people, some adults, get tired of kind of being written by the world around them, and they pick up the pen and write their own story. We call that the self-authored mind, because here, and it's like, what do I think my success is, right? What do I think I should, who do I think I should love? How do I think I should love? Who do I think I should be with? Where do I think I should live? Suddenly those other voices are still inside us, but the guardian of those voices, the boss, is me. Instead of having them be the boss of me from outside, I'm the boss of me from the inside. And then very few grown-ups transition from this place where like I'm the boss of me to realizing it's not really totally true. Really, I'm kind of co-creating myself with you. Like whatever emerges from our conversation emerges because you were there and because I was there. And it also kind of emerges because the people who are watching us, even though they're not even there yet. That we are collectively co-constructing this thing, and that none of us is the sole author of any of it. And so in this more emergent, self-transforming mind, then we begin to understand the interdependence of the world. We begin to play with paradox and polarity, and we begin to really find like our comfortable place in a world of complexity and ambiguity. So that's kind of the arc of that theory as we have it. And those who are kind of paying attention, and you too, can probably be thinking like, what pieces of me live in which of those eras?
So they could be, you could be in several different places at one time, different parts of your life.
I think it's probably true that we can kind of move around between these things with one foot in one place and one foot in another. Or on our best days, we can reach this far, and we don't always have our best days. But the idea of this theory is you can only kind of do that up to the place where you've evolved to in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're earlier on your path, you might not be able to access those things that come later on because you just haven't grown into them yet. Mm-hmm. It's like when we're growing taller as little kids, we can always reach and grab something where we used to be able to stand, but there's some limit to what we can reach towards.
So how can we, how does it happen that we break through to the next, get taller and reach higher? How does that happen?
Well, it happens over time and often with intention. So some things the world throws at us, and Piaget was the first one to talk about how we spend a lot of our time like trying to get the world to fit into our current sense-making structure. And we like make up all kinds of stories to make it fit. But eventually something doesn't fit anymore. We can't see the world the way we have seen it and still interact with the complexity of the world around us. And so we either have to like retreat from that complexity, or if we can't retreat from that complexity, the idea is we have to break through to a new capacity, making sense of it. And so a lot of development comes as we're pushed into, into life phases like having children, which can be incredibly developmental, into taking leadership positions, which can be incredibly developmental, into moving to different places, which can be incredibly developmental. Now, each of these creates the context for our development, but we all know people who've done all those things and have not grown at all. Generally, they either need really strong supports around them, or they feel really mad at the world, right? Because there's like something that doesn't work between them and the world. They can't quite cope with it. And I believe we can support people by either helping them have these strong supports, which usually are in the form of some kind of community, which is also degrading these days, or helping people grow themselves to be able to handle what's coming at them.
Yeah. So so we have the choice to either expand or contract, and things like coaching and self-reflection and are ways that we can continue on that path. And so if you were going to like say, are we as a human society moving together along the trajectory, or are we just the scatter plot graph? Is there any kind of patterns that you're seeing?
Yeah. I mean, all theories are kind of metaphors, right? Bill Perry, who's kind of the father of this branch of developmental theory, said, all theories are wrong in every particular case. So, so theories describe in kind of a rough, in a rough way, they describe the collective trajectory of individuals. And so they get more metaphorical. They begin to break when we use them either in very granular ways, and they get very much more metaphorical when we use them in like population-wise ways. I think one of the things we can do is we can notice that the things that are coming at us are more complex than they've been for probably all of human history. Like we just see the complexity of the pandemic we're in right now, and we see the different responses to it, and the different interactions that we have with our rules, with our communities, with our systemic challenges. And we see that this is like a very complex soup. And so what we can say is that there's a whole lot more coming at us that requires us to step into something. Now, I think it's pretty clear that as a collective, we are not collectively stepping into this thing with very much grace. But I think that's probably to be expected, because evolution is meant to happen over hundreds of generations, and the upsurge of complexity is happening over a couple of generations. The thing that gives me hope for it is that we as humans can, and might be the only creatures who can intentionally evolve. We can choose this evolution, and we can develop supports for our own evolution, which isn't really unusual in the animal kingdom. And so it might be that with all this stuff that's coming at us right now, we'll have more capacity to make those choices.
Can you say more about choosing your evolution? Can you talk a little more into
I think it's this. I think we can get into places where we can say, like, the world out there is too much for me, is not understandable by me. I can't interact with it well. And then we can say, like, I'm mad at it. Like, I want that world to change. And I think we see a ton of that, like in the US political system, in most political systems, we see a ton of people who are like, I hate what I'm seeing and I want it to change. And even if it breaks, this is okay, because any change is better than having it go on. And then there are people who say, wait, I think I need a different vantage point. I think something in me needs to change to meet what's going on so that I can influence the world around me. And that decision is a decision we can make, right? About who are we going to be in the face of this thing. And that's not a common decision in the animal kingdom. This is not a thing I think we've found in many other animals.
So questions that we could ask ourselves, might be, who do I want to be, next? What are some other like self-inquiries that we could ask ourselves to see where we are now and where we might want to go, whether we're ready or where we, do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, I love the I love recognizing some kind of an emotion and then investigating it. Like one of the emotions that's really useful to investigate is the emotional blame.
Blame.
Blame. When we are, when we experience ourselves as blaming, that's a really interesting, it's a really interesting place to be. And then to kind of begin to make sense of the different parts of that blame, like what responsibility is a very sophisticated set of questions. It can get very nuanced. What's my part? What's in the social surround that's created this systemically? What's in the particular flavor of this moment that's created this micro experience? What belongs to the other person? You know, like all these questions can get asked when we have this kind of simpler emotion of blame arise. And in each of the arisings of a particular reaction, there's just so many places for us to investigate. And each of that investigation, you know, you are talking about the kaleidoscope, right? Each of them allows us a new vision, a new way for the pieces to be, so that we can see the world slightly differently. And the more we're able to see the world slightly differently, the more we're able to make sense of that pattern in a new and more nuanced way.
I want to ask you a question, and with permission, you don't have to answer. I'm curious, what questions are you asking yourself now, in your stage where you are at this time?
I ask these same questions of myself, you know, like when I feel a strong arising of something like blame or something like um, hopelessness, or for me in this moment when I feel like a desperate need sometimes to know what's going to happen next, and to parse out that need and to like, talk to myself about it. It's the arising of what my nervous system really wants, which is the safety of knowing what tomorrow might be like. And we don't have that right now. And so being able to like notice that part of me that wants that, and also put it next to other parts of me who can kind of delight in the opportunity for invention and creativity that now is, to have that conversation and not just give in to one thing or another. That's one of the things I'm doing now. There's also my life journey is about like my children are now 19 and 23, and that creates the conditions for a whole different space of my own parenting, and different forms of relationships there. I run a leadership firm that's growing and growing, and that creates a different way for me to understand systems and how systems grow and change and scale. So each of these contexts allows me to kind of bump up against myself and then be in a different kind of conversation.
So you're noticing your growing edges. That's your, you know, I know that's what you work on with leaders. And so the ways to identify, you know, your growing edges are when you're noticing these different emotions that come up, these different interesting emotions that you're like, what does that mean? You know, where did this come from? And then what?
I think our growing edges, because when you ask somebody like, what's your growing edge, they can basically never answer this question, unless they have a coach who's told them. I think our growing edges are sort of like walking in a room with our eyes closed, and we only know where the edges are when we stub our toes. And so it's actually, and we don't have the sense, oh, that's the edge. We have the sense, oh, now my foot really hurts. And so it's this this bumping into an edge, which often is like the first thing that happens often is like, who put this damn wall here, right? Like it goes into blame or frustration or self-blame, like, why can't I handle this? Or why didn't I see this coming? But we tend to want to look somewhere to put responsibility for this on. And when we can take that not as a difficulty, but as like a thing that has actually illuminated to us a piece of our limitation that we could grow beyond, that I think is when we enter into the ultimate developmental conversation with ourselves. Like, oh, this difficulty is here to show me another possible stretch.
Yeah. So, in the scope of all this, like what is like lighting you up the most right now about the work that you're doing and what you're learning? What's changing in the field?
I think things are becoming clear to us collectively. And when I say us collectively, I mean I work mostly with senior leaders in biggish or giant organizations. And I think a thing is becoming more clear that organizations are really made of human beings who are each having individual human experiences and who require each other in human ways. And I think people could have said that 16 months ago, right? And they would have like totally said, oh yeah, Jennifer, that's absolutely true. But I think people feel it in a different way right now. I think they know it in a different way because we understand some of the anguish and the loss we feel of each other. And we've also been peering into each other's living rooms and kitchens and all these other things in the last year. And so we are understanding that the person who came to work, whatever percentage that was we brought of ourselves, is a fraction of the person that exists. And so I think there's a way that the thing that's becoming more visible is our humanness and our interdependence, and that we can either push against that, as some people are, like close the borders, make everything safe, keep the other guys out, metaphorically or physically. But also there's an opportunity for us to collectively inhale and say, wow, so we really are mortal, fragile, interdependent beings. What do we want to do with that? Particularly in the world I travel in, the organizational world, where we have mostly constructed systems that help us forget that as often as possible.
So what are the leaders and the companies on the growing edge, doing with that?
The folks I have the privilege of spending time with are welcoming humanity in, welcoming mistakes, welcoming lack of polish, welcoming collective inquiry, welcoming I don't know, welcoming real conversations instead of the kind of performative dance that organizations have been about so often. And this is a struggle, right? Welcoming diversity, welcoming difference and the conflict that comes from difference, and the creative spark that's also the result of difference. Like, and staying in for the struggle of that, not having it get a little too hot and then stopping, which I think has been a luxury you know what I mean, that we've been able to engage in, that like when we get uncomfortable in organizations, we can just stop and do something else. And now there's not that much else to do. We have to just go through it.
Your feet are in the fire, and you're not just going to go back. We're going to go forward.
Yeah.
We're not going to stop. There's only one way.
Yeah.
What do you feel or see as areas that we have still yet to discover, that we don't know yet about the adult development theory? You named some of the stages. what's yet, what do you see as what's out there still that you want to learn more about?
I think there are these questions about most adult development theories, most complexity theories, cognitive complexity or self-complexity theories are quite language-based. And there are so many realms of human meaning making that are not language-based. And we have no idea, mostly, how to access, measure those. We get like the smallest amounts of insight into them in neuroscience and other forms of like looking at the brain or the physiological or nervous system response. But I think that there's a whole universe in understanding our non-linguistic meaning making. So I think that's something. How are we constantly sensing the world and reacting to it in ways that are not linguistic? And then I think there is this like co-creative space. How are we making each other up? And what if we were to lean into that as a collective and really try to understand how are we in this thing together? Instead of trying to disentangle ourselves and not be in it together or deny that, like we're not in it with the planet, we're not in it with the other creatures on the planet, we're not in it with people from a different country, like that's all separate. As we lean into the ways that it's impossible to, like it's kind of ludicrous to make that separate. I think there's like very cool things could happen.
I mean, I love thinking about, the transpersonal, parts of ourselves, the part that maybe in business or organizations they haven't embraced yet, as feeling too woo-woo, deep imagination, dreams, intuition, creativity, movement, music, all of those non-language based forms of heart-centered, forms of being. And that's, for me, where I'm excited about more people really acknowledging and living into that space.
Yeah, you must have a ton of ideas about this, Tami, about some of these questions. Like, what do you see as our evolutionary collective next step?
I mean, I feel that, moving into more of a feminine energy, that balance, bringing that. We've been in this masculine, that balanced world for so long, and even a lot of the women, that are in power still have that masculine energy. So it's not the same as masculine and feminine, male and female, obviously. So just bringing in more of that collaboration and circular energy and spiral energy and not knowing and following with your heart, rather than with your head, I feel is the what what this world really is needing right now for healing and for balance. And I'm hoping that in business, as things come along, that those will be more a part of the way that we relate to each other and the type of systems that we create. That's where I see the future as exciting, and then creating a shared vision. We know that what we, through quantum physics, what we believe is what we see. We're creating we're energy beings. How can we create this together, this vision together? And it must be very exciting working with leaders to do that, to say, what is this shared vision of this new world that we want?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful vision. And I think it's Barry Johnson has this idea about polarities, that polarities create this energy system, and that when we overuse one, we fall into the downsides of them. And I think that this masculine feminine energy question, and where have we been overusing this masculine energy, and what's the result of that overuse? Barry Johnson would say, like, if you lean too hard into one of them, you always fall into overuse. We need to have both of these things. And I think it's like fascinating that countries led by women have had fewer deaths in the pandemic. Like, this is a fascinating question about female leadership, and a form of leadership that doesn't look like male leadership with breasts. Like, we're talking about a different thing. And how do we awaken that? How do we allow women to be in those more feminine spaces in leadership positions? And how do we allow men to access those parts of themselves? I think these are super important questions. And then we have organizational structures, community structures, political structures that are mostly designed to amplify the masculine, to amplify the competitive, the zero-sum game-ness of that. How do we make shifts to those systems and structures so that more of this other form of leadership is drawn out? I think those are really important questions right now.
Are we ready? And where is that on the adult development spectrum?
Yeah, I think it's everywhere in the adult development spectrum, because men and women are everywhere on the adult development spectrum. But the question of handling both simultaneously, right, being able to recognize these currents simultaneously is a farther stretch, as opposed to deciding one of them is right or being told one of them is right. Understanding that the masculine and the feminine make a bigger thing together, that they are one human wholeness. This is a harder thing, as opposed to saying this is a good one and this is the bad one, or this is what we do at work and this is what we do at home, or whatever.
Right. So what are some, maybe some key takeaways, or some advice that you might offer to people that feel that there's more, and they might, they're on their path, to maybe open some doors?
I think if this conversation has been enlivening for folks, there's deeper inquiry here, deeper inquiry into who we are being, into what is my developmental space, where am I stubbing my toes against the wall in the dark, and then can I bring my attention to those things, not with blame or frustration, but with real curiosity. I really think that this leaning into a great sense of we don't know, we just don't know, and therefore we have to be curious. It's not knowable, but it is explorable. I think that that's a lovely energy with which to face our own development too. And then, there are things you could read, there are videos you could watch, there's journaling to talk to yourself, like novels are great, like anything that helps us get a little perspective on ourselves is something that has the potential for us to grow. So I don't think that there's one path here, but I think that there are paths, and there is the awareness that we're walking a path, not to arrive somewhere, but to continually open ourselves up to new possibilities.
Yeah, I think that's a nice, way to put this. And is there anything that that hasn't been said yet that you feel would like to say in this conversation? Anything that you feels coming up that hasn't been said yet?
I guess the last thing I want to say is right now our nervous systems are activated all the time because we live in this like very weird world that generally is not so good for our nervous systems. It tells us to be on alert, and many of the things that have been restorative for humans for 100 generations are not restored. We don't have access to right now. A hug, a soft voice, a communal meal around a campfire, right? Like these things are gone, and we're often mediated by screens in this way. So I also want to say that I think one of the most important things for our development right now is kindness for ourselves and for one another, and kind of generosity of spirit. Because there's a way that development can be like yet another thing on our to-do list, and it's exhausting. There's a way that even like self-care can be another thing on our to-do list that's exhausting. And a lot of the folks I know have little kids at home right now. They're trying to work full-time jobs. They have no support, and there's no room for anything. And so if in this moment there's no room for anything but just like survival, I think kindness to ourselves that we don't have to grow all the time. We could grow another day. Like growth will be there for us. Like the opportunity for our unfolding is always ahead of us, and it doesn't have to be tomorrow.
We don't have to rush into it. It's not something to check off and, oh, I did some growing today, check, right?
We can just let ourselves off that hook.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation a lot, and to hear your perspective. It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing everything that you shared today. And I like to say to be continued, because I hope that it is, and love to continue the collaboration. So
yeah, thanks so much, Tami, and good luck with this this giant dream of yours, and may it make a ripple in this thing that we're experiencing. It's huge. Thank you.
We're co-creating together, right? So
yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.